Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I'm your host, Marianne Petrie. There is a non-denominational retreat at the Resolution Center of Jacksonville, Florida. This will be a time of support and renewal for parents and grandparents on the journey of parental alienation. Standing strong in resilience, paving the way for good health and a great future. This will start April 22nd through the 24th. 2022 at the Resolution Center in Jacksonville, Florida, and I will have all the information in the podcast notes. I have a brand new guest. Her name is Peggi Wegener. She's a licensed mental health counselor in Florida and has been a psychotherapist for 35 years. She has extensive experience in suicide prevention, crisis intervention, and adult mental health and wellness, including the treatment of stress, depression, anxiety, abuse, grief, trauma, and more. She obtained her certification as a TRE provider in 2017 and was invited to become a TRE provider trainer. She began that certification process in 2020 and expects to complete it in 2022. She loves teaching TRE because not only is it effective in reducing muscle tension, calming the nervous system, and building resiliency, it is also self-empowering and self-initiating. Once learned, a person can continue to use TRE on his or her own without being dependent on a practitioner. Peggi uses TRE at least twice a week as maintenance for her own nervous system and experience better sleep, more patience with normal irritations, and less physical symptoms of stress. And I completely welcome you, Peggi, to the show. How are you? And how did you even get into all this?
Good morning, Marianne. I appreciate being here. I look forward to our conversation. In terms of how did I get into TRE, TRE was introduced to me through another training program. So I have always been interested in combining the body with psychotherapy, that I don't think they're two separate things. I think they inform each other. And if I leave that out, then I'm missing a big part of the puzzle. So I got involved in a training that is a specific type of psychotherapy that integrates the body. And as part of that training program, there was a woman there who was in the process of certifying, and she introduced us to TRE. And I was pretty blown away, honestly, that first session, I sat up afterwards and my mind was so quiet. And I remember saying, is this going to last? Because I'm used to my mind being quite a chatterbox. And she laughed and she said, of course not. But if you can experience that quietness for a period of time, you can expect that could grow longer across time. And pretty much I was hooked and very interested in knowing more. And so over time, I got interested in the TRE community.
So this is a series of exercises?
We call them exercises, but it's not an exercise like you would do at a gym. So you're not trying to grow muscle. That's not the purpose of the movements. The movements are designed to connect us again to our bodies. So each muscle group is engaged in a systematic way because we all, under stress and tension, pretty much cut off from our bodies. We become talking heads, right? The body's just there to carry the head around. And yet the reality is there's constant signals going from the mind to the body, from the body back to the brain to the mind. And so these movements engage us again with our bodies. And they're also designed to fatigue certain muscles. Again, fatigue, not grow muscle. We're not trying to become stronger in the process. But the fatigue of those big muscles is kind of the road in to the tremor mechanism, which is what is key in what TRE does for us.
Well, that's fascinating. How long when you teach someone, how long does a session last?
So initially, because I'm going to take someone through all of the process, right? We need to do all the lead-in movements before they are either laying down or sitting up or even standing to access that neurogenic tremor, that a process typically would take about an hour.
Mhm.
Now, over time, it takes less time, right?
Mhm.
Because people know kind of what they're doing. And so there's less coaching needed, and they're connecting to their bodies in more easily, more quickly. And what I find is they will connect to the neurogenic tremor more quickly. It's almost like they're more comfortable with it and their bodies kind of know where we're going.
Mhm.
And because it's a natural process, it's almost like the body goes, oh, yes, yes, let's get there.
Uh-huh.
And so they activate more easily.
And that would probably, help with the stress issue. When you're doing these movements, would you say it automatically starts to reduce stress as soon as you start with these exercises?
I don't know if people experience in general that as soon as they start into the exercise, they feel a calming effect. But I think over time that can be true. Because
Mhm.
again, just like with meditation or a relaxation process, when you've kind of gone down that road enough
Mhm.
times, then the body and the brain seem to know where we're going. And so right away, it starts down that path.
Mhm.
And for TRE, let me just explain. The neurogenic tremor is built into the body. So all mammals shake and vibrate and tremor as part of recovering from stress. It's
Mhm.
humans that by about the age of 10, we've kind of gotten the message, don't do that. Like,
Mhm.
you look weird. That's kind of crazy. That looks weak. We judge it. And so we tend to lock down against it. But most of us have experienced that involuntary shaking.
Mhm.
If we had a near car accident, we can
Mhm.
feel that shake in our bodies, or we're in a conflict with somebody, and pretty immediately our heart starts to race and we start to shake a little bit. That's the neurogenic tremor. And it is the body's way of trying to regulate us. So to discharge all that buildup of tension.
Mhm.
So when we let that tremor occur, then what we find is the muscles start to relax and our nervous system starts to calm back down to that settled place where I can connect with you openly, right? I'm not in a fear position.
Mhm. Do you have people come to you with, just horrible experiences that, they just can't even cope with? And, do these people require more, sessions or more in-depth sessions?
So yes, for someone who has routine stress and tension, pretty much they could probably learn the process, some of them even on their own.
Mhm.
David Berselli is the developer of
Mhm.
TRE, and he has a YouTube channel that has
Mhm.
all kinds of videos, including one that shows the movements and the process.
Mhm.
So for a lot of folks, they might even be able to learn it that way. Personally, I don't recommend it, but
Mhm.
it can be done that way.
Mhm.
When people come to me, I tell them, in general, it'll take 3 to 5 sessions for you to become confident that you can lead yourself through the movements, access that tremor mechanism, and pretty much feel good at the end
Mhm.
of a session. Okay. For folks who have really significant trauma, then part of what we don't know is how their system responded to it. Did they hold the tension of fight or flight? Okay. Or did they go into a freeze response, which is more of a dissociative, numb kind of thing? So if you think of it as a curve,
Mhm.
right, that there's a section of that curve that would be fight or flight.
Mhm.
And I can come down the curve even once I've come up into fight or flight. And we do it all day long.
Mhm.
Marianne, we all get
Mhm.
irritated, annoyed, worried, whatever. That's moving us into that sympathetic nervous system charge, but it just doesn't go so high that we're overwhelmed.
Mhm.
So we come in and out of it kind of all day long. When something's more intense, right, we rise higher into that level of fight or flight that can be rage, right? Or terror kind of thing. But we can still come back down the curve. If I go into freeze, so the freeze response is a preparation to die. So everything slows down. And literally, our body releases chemicals that help numb us from pain. And we kind of zone out, and the system literally prepares to die. If we survive, well, what's going to happen? You've now peaked in this freeze. The first thing you're going to enter when you come back down that curve is fight or flight. Back into the terror, back into the panic, okay? What helps us come through it is connection with another person. So social engagement, all right? If someone has survived chronic sexual abuse, domestic violence, witnessing things can put us into freeze, then they need the support of another person to come through it. And so that's where a provider becomes very important, right? I can help hold the space, hold the safety for the person and help them regulate the process. It's not a race. It's not a one and done. We're going to do that in small increments that are tolerable to their system. And then they can integrate the change. So that's where working with a provider over a longer period of time is helpful till the person feels confident. I can regulate myself. I know when I'm starting to get too intense, and I know how to rest. And then I can come back to the tremor and rest again, right? I can go back and forth. But until someone learns that process, they can sometimes really overwhelm themselves. And then they don't want to do TRE anymore, right? It's too scary. It's too overwhelming.
But, they should still continue and work with it, because the overall outcome is to maintain a calmness so you maybe don't end up with a heart attack or some other, like a stroke or something.
Well, or I would say most of us don't recognize that our reactivity to small things in the world are most likely stress that's been trapped from our histories. So now something that sort of looks like what I've been through before, I misinterpret as the same kind of threat when maybe it isn't. So if you think about, if my system is in fight or flight, so I've got all that muscle tension in my shoulders and my back, and I'm gritting my teeth and all of that, I'm not sleeping well, then a look on your face could be the thing that I think, my system's telling me I'm in danger. Was it that look on your face? Was it that tone of voice? Was it that you walked by and didn't say anything to me? All of a sudden, I'm interpreting my world as a constant threat. When in reality, I didn't even know what my face did. My tone of voice isn't a threat. It's an emotion. And I'm not in, the other person isn't in danger. But that's where we get puzzled by each other. We're like, wow, why are you reacting so much to this? Or what made you think that? And it's very likely we're holding old stuff and we just don't even recognize it.
And we don't even know we're doing it. And sometimes even someone may resemble, say, someone who caused you a lot of damage in your life.
Yes.
And it's not that person's fault that they look like that person.
Right.
It just triggers all this.
It does. Yes. And so what you're describing is not only now am I maybe responding or reacting to whatever the person in front of me said or did, but it's amplified by my history. So now I'm over responding where, okay, you're annoying me. I should be able to say to you, well, that was really rude. And kind of that be the level of my response. And instead it's it's this intensity that doesn't match the situation. And a lot of times people will tell me, I don't understand why why I act like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, well, gosh, if we can get your nervous system to come back down into that calm, I call it a relaxed ready,
Mm-hmm.
because we're not trying to disable your alarm system. We're just trying to get it to not be so hypersensitive.
Mm-hmm.
So then I'm much more able to say, well, I don't like how you just talked to me.
Mm-hmm.
Or, gosh, the story that went off in my head is this, is that what you meant? And I can clarify rather than react.
Mm-hmm. Do you think some people have a hard time grasping this when they come to see you for these exercises, or it's I don't know, hard for them to process?
No, that once I have a chart, and it's called the polyvagal chart.
Mhm.
Stephen Porges kind of helped us conceptualize this whole idea of fight, flight, freeze.
Mhm.
Okay. And I show them the chart and I talk about the normal physiological responses. So I'm going to put it in a context, Mariana. If a
Mhm.
lion was running at me,
Mhm.
okay, then my system's alarm is going to
Mhm.
go off. And immediately my body starts deciding where to send energy so
Mhm.
that I can survive. Okay.
Mhm.
So if I'm about to die, which is what this system is saying, right? My alarm's screaming,
Mhm.
then what do you think is going to happen to heart and lungs?
Mhm.
What do you imagine?
You just increase your respirations, s-
Yeah.
and and you would also tighten up too. That would also increase your respirations.
Yes. So heart and lungs start to work
Mhm.
harder because I'm going to need a lot of blood going everywhere. And I'm definitely going to need an oxygen supply.
Mhm.
Okay. And my muscles contract in preparation for a big action because I'm
Mhm.
either going to have to run for my life or fight for my life. So the muscles contract, kind of like if you were watching a cat
Mhm.
prepare to spring at a prey, right? They get all squiggly and curled up, and then there's
Mhm.
this wow, big action.
Oh, yes.
Same for me. Okay, my body contracts in preparation, and it's what would allow us to lift a car off a loved one
Mhm.
when under normal circumstances we could never do that.
Mhm.
So that makes sense, right? Heart and lungs get overstimulated,
Mhm.
muscles contract. Okay, what do you think happens to your gastrointestinal tract? If I'm
Well,
about to die,
mhm. Everything starts, I would say, vasoconstricting, and your gastrointestinal tract, it would I can't think of the medical term offhand, but just it would, like, lock up. I don't know how else to describe it.
sure, because if I put it in terms of if I'm about to die, does it
Mhm.
matter if I process food?
Mm.
Right?
Mm-mm.
That's the least of my worries.
Mhm.
Like, who cares if I'm hungry? Like, it doesn't matter. I'm going to
Yeah.
die if I don't figure
Mhm.
this out.
Right.
So, gastrointestinal tract shuts down. So we have phrases that most of us don't realize are actually quite accurate under high distress. We'll say things like, it scared the poop out of me.
Mhm.
Okay. Or I was so scared, I peed myself. Like we'll
Mhm.
say things like, scared the piss out of me,
Mhm.
something along those lines. That's actually accurate. Under high distress, my body says, don't put energy into holding. Like, get rid of that stuff.
Mhm.
And we literally will do that. Okay. So it's my body is making choices. Where do I need to send energy? So I'm shutting down certain things and overstimulating others.
Mhm.
So if I'm about to die, do you think it matters if I sleep?
Mhm.
Of course not. It would be kind of dumb to go to sleep if I'm under threat.
Right.
But it's meant to be a short-term system, right? The alarm goes off, I survive, my system calms back down.
Mm.
All right, here's the one that most people, all of those intuitively people go, yeah, of course. That's why I get a stomach ache. Yeah, of
Mhm.
course. That's why my shoulders hurt. But here's the other part. It interferes with complex problem solving. So that part of our brain becomes inaccessible because it's too slow.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm going to assess that lion, oh gosh, there's a really big lion. It's running at me. I bet that's going to hurt if it catches me. Gosh, I think there were some people over here I might be able to yell to, but my car is over there and there's a house over. You're dead already.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The lion has gotten you. So it interferes with generating options, evaluating options, and then deciding what to do. It needs you to go.
Mm-hmm.
So it's why we don't make very good decisions.
Mm-hmm.
If we're constantly under stress, we struggle to make a decision. Well, yeah, because the part of our brain that would be helpful with that is blocked. But then if we survive and we shake and tremble and we're shaking off, literally shaking off the stress, the tension, the buildup of the chemicals like adrenaline and norepinephrine to come back down to that relaxed ready. And we say things like, just shake it off. No, really, shake it off. Let your body shake and tremble, and it will settle and calm itself. And so that's what TRE is promoting. Right? It's trying to reconnect us to that natural mechanism that will release all that built up stress and tension and emotion. We hold a lot of emotion too.
And a lot of this emotion, could cause stomach ulcers. That's what I see the most of. I was going to think of something else other than, anxiety and depression.
Absolutely.
How do you get someone through, we'll say someone who has had major depression most of their lives? I mean, can this help alleviate it? I know it's not a cure.
Yeah, what I would say is that TRE isn't the end all be all. I would never tell you that. Okay. I think it is an excellent adjunct to other kinds of help. So even for athletes, TRE is helpful to athletes because it helps muscle recovery. So if we're talking about somebody who has been abused or has experienced clinical depression or anxiety, then it's not a replacement for therapy. It's an adjunct to therapy, right? We're working with the entire organism. So some therapists who will send folks to me will send them to me to help teach them some self-regulation and to help discharge some of the buildup so that when they come in for talk therapy, they are less activated, right? They're more able to engage in that insight-oriented processing, as opposed to as soon as they start to talk about whatever that stressor or abuse or trauma is, they go right to fight, flight, freeze. I'm trying to keep them into that social engagement system. And that's where I think TRE is a wonderful adjunct. So I do have therapists who will refer folks to me specifically for TRE, and that's my only role, even though I am a psychotherapist. I'm not doing therapy during TRE. I'm teaching this process, and then they go back and work with their therapist, sometimes even doing things like EMDR. I don't know if you're familiar with EMDR.
I've heard of it. I'm not too familiar with it.
So it's another tool, a modality to help people process trauma, but it can be very intense. And so TRE is a way for people to learn how to self-regulate so that when they participate in EMDR, they are able to know what their limit is and voice that, and again, be able to go back and forth in and out of the EMDR process successfully.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
Now, as far as someone bringing you, someone who's like 12 or 14, do you work with younger people or even younger?
I don't. Personally, I don't. But in terms of the TRE community is huge.
Hmm.
we're in, I don't know, I think on every continent except Antarctica. Okay. I
Hmm.
mean,
Wow.
so
Okay.
there are TRE providers all over the world.
Hmm.
And so there are folks who are from other disciplines. So there is a occupational therapist who works with children and integrates TRE into the work she does.
Hmm.
There are folks who are yoga instructors or physical therapists. All kinds of folks have become TRE certified. And so each of them kind of brings their background to the work.
Hmm.
I personally wouldn't work with young people simply because I don't have a background in working with them.
Hmm.
So I would want to find someone who is knowledgeable about teenagers or children. But I do know providers who work with young kids, elementary age,
Hmm.
right? Or work with adolescents, folks who specifically focus on athletes or people with certain disorders,
Hmm.
um, whether that's physical disorders, mental disorders, disease processes, those kinds of things.
Hmm.
So TRE is a wonderful adjunct, and it can be modified for all kinds of folks. I don't. I think there is someone who could figure out how to make TRE workable for
Hmm.
pretty much anybody.
You know, but have you ever had a parent come in that has been through such an ordeal of, we'll say a family court process, and they are just so traumatized by it, and they've got such post-traumatic stress disorder that they almost can't function?
Yeah, that I personally have not worked with that population. I've worked
Mhm.
with lots of adults and people in process and with family drama, domestic violence. I've worked with some parents who have been alienated, cut
Mhm.
off from an adult child and their grandchildren,
Mhm.
um, in psychotherapy,
Mhm.
not using TRE, because not everybody's open to TRE.
Mhm.
It's for some folks, it's just kind of like, oh, that's a little too weird for me.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
say, okay, well, let's talk about other ways that you can calm your nervous system, because being able to settle your system is going to allow you to function better, which is what everybody wants. Right? They just want to be able to function well and
Mhm.
not be burdened all the time
Mhm.
with their histories. It's always going to be painful. There's a therapist, his name is Gabor Mate, and he's a trauma specialist, I would say. And I'm not going to get this quote perfect, but you'll get the gist of it. He says, trauma is not the bad things that happen to us. Those things are terrible. Trauma is what happens inside us as a result of the bad things we experienced.
Mhm.
And that's what we're trying to calm down. We're never going to change that we had those horrible experiences.
Mhm.
We can live well even though we have experienced those terrible things. And that's
Mhm.
what TRE is trying to promote, is that our system, mind, body, spirit, can settle back down and enjoy our lives again.
Mhm. I think a lot of people need this.
Oh my goodness, yes.
I mean, I think this would also help. I'm thinking, people that are, say, diabetics, that when they get stressed out, their blood sugar, you know, elevates. I mean, this would help so many people.
I really do feel that way. I'm very passionate about
Mhm.
TRE,
Mhm.
that I don't think there's a person on the planet who wouldn't benefit,
Mhm.
because all of us experience life as stressful.
Right.
It doesn't have to be trauma level stress, but
Mhm.
you know, I recently got an email and recognized that the minute I read the subject line, my heart started racing,
Mm.
right? And just the awareness of, oh, that's interesting. I haven't even read it, and my alarm system is going off. Right? My heart rate's going up, and I can already feel my stomach jittering and thinking, all right, so my system is perceiving a threat. Now, obviously it's not life-threatening, but my alarm system is going off anyway. And if I'm going to respond well to what the content of this email, I'm going to need to settle myself down. Well, how am I going to do that? Well, TRE is my go-to, right? I'm going to take the time to read it, but then I'm going to wait. And I'm probably going to do TRE or take a walk or do some things I know to do that are going to bring my system back down to that relaxed ready. And then my mind is going to work well. How am I going to respond to this?
Now, when you said mind ready, what about, some people have this brain fog that they complain about. This can, like I know you have said before in the past, this is not a cure-all. TRE is not a cure-all, but, can this help with having a clearer mind?
So how I think about that is if what's happening with brain fog is that my complex problem solving is not accessible. Okay. So I'm having a hard time holding on to information and sorting it and making a decision. TRE may well be able to help with that. But look, brain fog can also be that you've got something going on medically that also needs to be addressed. And TRE isn't going to fix that, right? It's not the cure-all. And there are things we need to make sure are being evaluated to determine that. And I say that to folks who come to me for therapy. Look, just because you have depressive symptoms or anxiety symptoms, I don't know that that is primary mental health. Or if you have something hormonal going on, if your thyroid is out of whack, are you pre-diabetic? And so part of what's happening is that we need to rule that stuff out and then look at primary mental health. Right. And so I kind of feel the same way about TRE. TRE is a great tool, but it isn't going to cure diabetes, diabetic fog, right? We got to work with that in a different way.
Well, that's just so fascinating because it has so much to offer. And from what I hear, you're going to be at the Resolution Center at Jacksonville, Florida in April for that retreat on April 22nd and 23rd and 24th.
Yeah.
So
yes.
I know people are looking forward to seeing you there too. And
well, they're going to get the opportunity to do TRE 3 times over the weekend. And so they will get a good picture of what it can do for them. Most people, the first time they do it, their mind is very busy going, what is this? What is happening? I don't know if I like this. They're very cautious. The second time they kind of relax a little bit more and can experience more of the benefit. And by the third time, they really get a sense of, can this be helpful to them?
Do you think people that say do yoga and, they're probably more receptive if they were to come to you, they would be more open and just maybe embrace it or grasp it quicker?
You'd be surprised. The tremor mechanism is involuntary. Okay. So the body starts to shake and vibrate and you are in charge. Okay. You can make it stop, but it is involuntary. So it's not like you are making it happen. And that sense of it being involuntary can be quite unnerving at first. So even for people who do yoga, they're used to the stretching and some of the movements that we use in TRE, but they can be just as uncomfortable with that tremor mechanism at first. One of the first times I did yoga, which was after I had learned TRE, at the very end, they had us lay in corpse pose, which is just you're laying on your back, your legs are straight, your palms are up. And my whole body started to tremor in that neurogenic tremor. So it wasn't unnerving for me. I did smile to myself because I had my eyes closed. And I thought, I wonder if the instructor is looking at me and thinking, she okay? But I'm not unnerved by it anymore, right? It's okay if my body shakes and tremors. But even for folks who do yoga regularly, meditate regularly, some other of those things that can promote well-being, the tremor mechanism can still be quite unfamiliar and take a little bit to get comfortable with. Yeah.
I'm sure you have people that are used to sleeping on their back because they have to. There's just no other position that's comfortable for them.
Yeah.
And, and that's easy.
Well, I think also once people experience the tremor mechanism, they become aware that they actually tremor off and on a daily, weekly kind of basis. They've just never noticed before. So I wake up sometimes in the night and my jaw is trembling. And I chuckle to myself. At this point, it doesn't unnerve me. I just think, oh, that's interesting. I wonder why that muscle is discharging in the night. But it's fine. I just roll over and go back to sleep. The beauty of TRE is you don't have to know the story for TRE to be helpful. So for someone who has a trauma history, they may not want to talk about it. And TRE can be helpful without them ever sharing anything about that. That's pretty cool. It's also sometimes when you tremor, you may have a memory come to mind. Okay. It'll come, it'll go. Sometimes you can have an emotion show up and maybe you know what it's connected to and maybe you don't. But if you can go with it, then it's like a wave. It'll come, it'll crest, and it'll go. And you are processing something, whether your conscious mind can bring an experience to it consciously or not. And I think that is amazing. Absolutely amazing. And I've experienced it. So can I share a personal TRE experience?
Yes. That would be great.
So I'd been doing TRE for a while and I had a movement that was repetitive. Okay. So you have it in TRE, you have this vibration and shaking, but you can also have things, contractions, or my hand is bumped up and down on the floor before. No idea what that's related to, but it'll do that sometimes. And this one was from my core pulling me upward. So I'm laying on the floor, but my body's coming up off the floor and then coming back down. Well, after a while, that gets tiresome, right? That contraction in the gut. And I know sometimes those things happen and it will dissipate on its own. Like it'll just kind of come and go over the course of several TRE sessions. But this one wouldn't seem to let go. And so I was in a workshop with Dr. Berselli and we were paired up. It was a large group, a couple hundred people. And my partner was a new provider. And I had said to him, hey, I've got this movement and I don't know how to help it like release and be done. And pretty quickly, as soon as it started, he got uncomfortable. And so he's like waving his arm to get Dr. Berselli to come over. And Dr. Berselli watched for a minute and then he got on his knees behind me so that he had me lay up against him. So I was a little more upright, right? Instead of flat on the floor. And I'm still contracting that same way. And he says to me, Peggy, have you ever had the wind knocked out of you? Like, yeah, I was 12. I got thrown from a horse. And he goes, no, that's not it. How many babies have you had? Marianne, it was like he lit up my body. It was like my whole body just like shook in a very different way. And he started to laugh. And he said, Peggy, how many babies have you had? And I said, 3. But like, what is happening here? Right? He said, do you have them all naturally? I said, well, the first 2, but the third one was an emergency C-section. And he chuckled and he said, Peggy, you're going to finish giving birth to that child.
Hmm.
And I did not have conscious like memories coming into my mind about it, because literally my birth process had been interrupted. I'd
Mhm.
had strong contractions, but my baby was breech, and they decided, no way, we got to do something here.
Hmm.
And so it was abruptly interrupted. And so as soon as he kind of named it, then I continued this pulling up, but it got less and less. And over the next couple of sessions through that workshop, it dissipated. And I had people say to me, "You looked like you were having a baby. That movement looked like a woman sitting up in a contraction and then dropping
Mhm.
back." I thought, wow, because I
Mhm.
didn't have a conscious memory of it, but my body did.
Mhm.
My body got interrupted and it needed the completion. And I don't have that movement anymore
Hmm.
and haven't for a long time. I mean, that's just wild to me. So we don't have to know a story for the body to discharge old experiences.
Mhm. That are in our subconscious that we can't get rid of.
And they are in the body.
Mhm.
I mean, even think of people who've had surgeries. Often the area of the body that they had surgery on will tremor. And even though your conscious mind was anesthetized,
Mhm.
the body still experienced the trauma of a surgery.
Mm.
And the tremor mechanism seems to go there to release whatever the tension and trauma in the area was.
Mhm.
Pretty cool.
That's really interesting. That is an interesting story. Have you worked with people that have had, heart attacks? They have been under a lot of duress and stress, things like that?
Duress and stress, yes. I've not worked with somebody who specifically I know had a heart surgery. I have worked with an amputee,
Mm.
and we talked a lot about the trauma of what caused the amputation,
Mhm.
what led to it, and how angry she was with her body about it, and working together with TRE, she had not been able to successfully have a prosthetic. She didn't want to be out in public. And through, I don't know, maybe 6 months, close to a year, she not only had her prosthetic, she was going places on her own. She was walking with a walker. It was amazing. Just the change in her sense of herself as
Mhm.
she went through the tremor mechanism. It was pretty neat.
Wow. Well, because they say they have phantom pain.
Mhm. Yeah. And she did not talk to me about phantom pain particularly.
Mhm.
Although my mentor is a physiotherapist, and I had consulted her about working with this woman. And she said if she has phantom pain, she's likely to see improvement, which is interesting, right?
Mhm.
That TRE has the potential to calm that down as well.
Mhm. Well, that's fascinating. I mean, why do you think some people think this is so weird? Because, people are always searching for some alleviation to their stress level.
Because, look, all of us want a one and done. We
Mhm.
want a miracle.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
want to do one thing and bang, it's all over and done with. And that's not how our systems are devised. We
Mhm.
haven't been created to have an on off switch with things. And so TRE requires effort. You have to build it in and do it with some regularity to be able to get benefit. I love meditation, but if I
Mhm.
don't do it regularly, then I'm not going to see a whole lot of long-term benefit. I may feel better for an hour after I meditate, but if I'm doing it regularly, then that sense of calm is going to last much longer. And the same is true of TRE.
Mhm.
And I don't know about other folks, but I have a hard time with discipline.
Right.
Like I can think something's really good, but getting myself to do it regularly is the challenge. And the same is true for TRE. So, we want a fast fix, and TRE is not that. So even if after your first session you feel pretty good, it's not going to last. And that doesn't mean TRE won't help or won't work. It means, look, it's a process like any other process. You've got to build on it time after time after time after time. I have colleagues that no longer for themselves, and many of our clients, they don't need to do the lead-in movements anymore. They literally can lay down on the floor and access that tremor mechanism. That's amazing. But the reason is because they've done it and done it and done it and done it. And the body, that neurophysiology knows how to get there. And so the long-term benefits are amazing. I joke about what a funny experience doing TRE for myself is one of my sons was quite challenging as an adolescent, and he and I could flare each other really fast. And I was laying on the floor in the bedroom, tremoring, doing TRE, and he came to the door and he started, right? And I stayed calm, and he walked away down the hall, and I yelled after him, maybe we should only talk when I'm tremoring, so that it didn't escalate out of control. But that's part of the benefit is, right, I can stay calmer longer, not perfectly or endlessly, but longer, so that maybe I can have tough conversations and not get flared into that fight or flight, kill or be killed.
I think that would be very helpful to a lot of people, especially people with older kids that are, picking fights with them. I mean, some of these kids just pick fights. It's like
part
having
of adolescence.
Yeah.
Yeah. But think about it, even with spouses, that we can flare each other pretty easily. Workplaces, wouldn't it be lovely if most of us were functioning in that relaxed, ready social engagement? I'm open, I'm curious, I can really listen to you. How different relationships would be, our interactions with one another. But, I think most of us are walking around with a certain amount of that fight or flight happening inside us. So we're always prepared to kill or be killed.
Yeah, it's better if you can remain calm. And I just wish, between, everything that's happened in the last 2 years with COVID and that, I'm sure, everyone's stress levels have been extremely high. I've noticed there's been a lot of angry people or, nasty, flying off the handle types of individuals.
Behavior.
Yeah.
All that behavior. Because we are all stressed out. And again, the stress mechanism puts us into that sympathetic nervous system charge. And the message of that is, I'm about to die. Okay, well then, of course, I'm going to be on the defense and ready. And I call it kill or be killed. If you and I are having a conversation and all of a sudden we've moved into that sympathetic charge, the only thing that's going to happen is damage, because we're in kill or be killed. We're given that choice. I'm going to kill you first, right? That's my system is going to go into, or I'm going to try to retreat. Sometimes that works. Sometimes, often in couples, one person's a retreater and the other chases. And so the escalation just keeps going. Whereas if we could separate, calm down, try again in that same conversation, we'd get a little further before we flare. That would be a better process.
Well, then a lot of people should be taking this course,
Yeah.
How now, how hard is it to become a teacher of this?
Oh, good question. So it's a 3 modules. So
Mhm.
there's 3 teaching sessions. They're 12 to 15 hours a piece. So module one's 12 hours, the next 2 are 15. And that's just teaching time and experience time. In between, we want people to be knowledgeable, but we also want them to be safe practitioners.
Mhm.
We want them to know their limits. And so they have to practice. So it's not just you go take a class and then you're ready to go. You have to practice with your colleagues, then you have to practice with volunteers, and you do it with a trainer who
Mhm.
is with you, who can coach right there in that session, can coach, and then can debrief with you afterwards, right?
Mhm.
Of what did you learn? What did you see? What did I see? What could you do better, different next time? So they learn to teach individuals, and then they learn to teach groups. And a
Hmm.
group for us is 2, but they can, if they want to learn to teach larger groups, then they can practice that with us. So kind of the quickest that process can go is about a year.
Mhm.
But for other people, they take a little bit longer because they kind of stretch it out, or they need to practice some more. And one of our big things for provider trainees is you've got to do your own practice. You've got to be doing TRE yourself on a regular basis. This isn't, you learned it, you teach it, but you've no idea what it's like in your own body.
Mhm. Yeah,
So
that's interesting.
we really press our
Mhm.
trainees, and we can pretty much tell whether they're doing their own work or not. You
Mhm.
can tell when they tremor with, because we ask them, they do sessions with us where they tremor. We can tell
Mhm.
you haven't been doing the work. I can tell in your own body
Mhm.
that you're not practicing regularly. And if
Mhm.
you're not practicing regularly, how are you going to be present for this other person who's tremoring?
Mhm.
Yeah. So the
Yeah.
certification process is a global certification.
Mhm.
I suppose the beauty of um, of the pandemic was it forced all of us to learn how to teach online. And so there are a lot of
Mhm.
online trainings that are offered now. Still not my
Mhm.
preference. I want to teach in person. But there are those certification programs that you can find online.
Mhm.
The main website for global TRE is called traumaprevention.com. And one of the tabs is find a training. So all the information is there
Mhm.
about certification training and where it's offered. So globally,
Mhm.
it is offered all over the world. As English speakers, if you were so inclined, you could be certified by TRE Australia, TRE South Africa, TRE in England. Wherever there's an English speaking crowd, if you speak another language, you're likely to be able to find TRE taught in that language.
That's excellent.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Because this is how I would think this is going to help a lot of people.
I hope so. I hope that some of your folks will be intrigued enough to want to
Mhm.
find a local provider. You can also find providers on that trauma prevention website. But remember, if there's not somebody in your community, then you can find a provider and do it online.
Mhm. Well, that's great.
Yeah.
How can people reach you if they have any questions?
So they can reach out to me by email is probably the easiest. And my email is livingwell, TRE, @gmail.com. And if
Okay,
I'm
great.
not the right provider, Marianne, I am more than happy to find a provider that is right for them. That
Mhm.
is fine with me. Happy to do it, to make the connections.
Well, that's excellent. I'm so glad to have you on, and I'll probably would like to have you back on again.
Sure. Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you for letting me talk about TRE. I am passionate about it. I think it is a marvelous tool.
Mhm. I think so too. Well, hey, don't jump off, okay? Slam
Okay.
the Gavel is a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in the family courtrooms. I'm your host, Marianne Petrie, author of Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, and Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth. Please join us again here with Peggy and other exciting guests. Thank you again, Peggi Wegener.
Thank you. I enjoyed it, Marianne.
I did too. Thank you so much.